Hello, and welcome to our study as we read through the Bible in 2026. We are starting into the first week of February, and this week we're going to be going from Numbers chapter 7 to Numbers chapter 39. So a lot of reading, a lot of stuff in the book of Numbers, and to be honest, this is one of my favorite parts of the Old Testament. There's a lot that happens in the book of Numbers during these chapters, and we're going to start with a little bit more of a harder to read passage where every tribe donates the exact same amount of the exact same things to the tabernacle, but that's so to show that they're all unified in purpose and in worship of God. But once we get into chapter 9, they celebrate the Passover, which means that they've been out of Egypt for exactly 1 year at the foot of Sinai most of this time. And then God comes down as a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, and he starts leading the people of Israel to the promised land. Now, on the way, they're met with trouble. First off, the people complain that they've been eating manna for over a year, and they want meat to have. And God says, well, if you want meat, I'm going to give you so much meat it falls out of your ears. And he sends them just this gigantic flock of quail where it's so deep as far as the eye can see. It takes so long for them to gather it up. And then even along the way, Moses' siblings, Aaron, the high priest, and his sister Miriam, they start to have their own issues questioning Moses' judgment, and God has to come down and set them right, and even turns Miriam leprous for a bit. But they make it to the edge of the promised land, and they send in spies to spy out the promised land, and when the spies come back, they have examples of the fruit and the produce of the land, and they say it's a really good land. You can grow a lot here. The food is bountiful. Oh, but by the way, the people live in big cities that are fortified. They'll be hard to fight, and some of them have giants living among them. And they cause this lack of faith that the people actually say, it would be better if we just turn around, go back to Egypt, tell Pharaoh we're sorry. And God does not like this. He spent a lot of time and effort getting them out of Egypt. And so what basically ends up happening is God says, okay, that's it. Everyone who's alive today, out of all these people, the only two who were going to go and actually enter the promised land are going to be Joshua and Caleb. The only two actually had faith that God could take them into the promised land, defeat the giants, defeat the people as God had promised. Everyone else, you're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years until you all die out. And that's what the rest of the book of Numbers really is about. Now, Numbers has sort of this pattern in it. The people rebel against God. Moses is praised for their forgiveness after a plague or a judgment or some sort of punishment. And God forgives them, but then he gives them a few extra rules about, say, their sacrificial system, how they have to be to present sacrifices or what has to come with the sacrifices. Each little time there's a rebellion, there's a few more rules added into the mix. Now, as far as what ends up happening, there are times where an entire group of Levites, the Korahites, the sons of Korah, they rebel against Moses and Aaron and try to bring up their own group, and God has the earth swallow them whole. Now, what is interesting to note is that many of the Psalms are written by the descendants of the sons of Korah who didn't rebel. And so God actually redeemed the line of Korah that way, and that they ended up being a lot of the Psalm writers that we have. Then we see that there's some trouble with the different elders of the group of Israel, of the people of Israel. And they're like, well, why does Aaron get to be the priest other than that he's the brother of Moses? Shouldn't there be some other way that we can tell? And God provides a way and produces a miracle in which he has Aaron's staff. It actually starts growing flowers, even though it's just a stick. And that proves that Aaron was the one that he chose. And we keep going on, and eventually, Miriam dies. Moses' sister dies. They've been wandering in the desert for a long time. And then at a certain point, Aaron dies as well. And so Moses is left on his own, and kind of in the middle of all of this, there are different challenges where, Moses gets tired of having to deal with the people complaining all the time about wanting food or wanting water. And he prays to God to give him water, and God says, well, go talk to this rock. But instead, Moses says to the people, do I have to bring forth water? And he strikes the rock, and God still has the rock produce water. But because of this one small moment of rebellion in Moses' heart, he is no longer allowed to enter the promised land. And then later, the people rebel against God, and God sends snakes among them, and Moses has to make an image of a bronze snake, this almost like an idol, and he crucifies it, he hangs it on a pole, and anyone who could look at the snake hanging on the pole after being bitten by a snake won't die, but they then live. And these things just continue to happen. Now, along the same time, Joshua is starting to grow as a warrior. He fights against different people. He starts defeating kings. He defeats King Og, who is a giant. They say his bed was 12 feet long, so they assume that he was 11 feet tall. We see that the people who live in the nations around the promised land start to get nervous with the people of Israel. The king of Moab hires this guy Balaam, who's a seer or a prophet in a sense, to have him curse Israel. And he says, well, I'll do what I can, but I can only speak what God will have me say. And while he's on his way to pick up the money and go curse Israel, his donkey stops, and because they seize an angel waiting to kill Balaam for trying to pull one over and curse God's people. And when Balaam tries to get the donkey to go, the donkey actually talks back. That's a pretty famous story. And every time that Balaam goes to curse the people of Israel, instead he sends blessing. He speaks blessings over them. And so it gets to the point where in order to get the people of Israel to be cursed by God, the king of Moab figures that he has to actually get the people to sin against God. And he finds a way to send Moabite prostitutes to entice the people to sin and to worship Baal instead of God. And it almost works, except for Phinehas, Aaron's grandson, takes a spear and kills a man who is committing this sin, saving the people of Israel. Now we get into the last couple chapters that we're reading this week. They take a census, and it turns out that the same number of people who left Egypt, roughly, are the same number of people who are entering the promised land. It is just the next generation down. The old generation passed away, the next generation took their place. And then they set out a lot of extra things. They reiterate some of their rules. Moses confirms that it is going to be Joshua who takes his place. And they get ready to figure out how they're going to celebrate the feasts of the Lord once they enter into the promised land. Now next week, we'll pick up, and we'll probably end up finishing the book of Numbers and entering into Deuteronomy as the people prepare to leave behind the desert and enter into the promised land after 40 years of wandering.